I welcome you back to the House of Graphic Literature, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite, um, sort of, I don't know if I'd call it a trope or what, but I think parody superheroes are really fucking cool. And this is to say, um, not just funny superheroes, but I will talk about that a little bit. Um, but I mean characters that are obviously meant to be these sort of bastardizations of famous um, sort of comic book tropes and characters, and I think that the art of um, parody in that regard has quite a rich history. Um, and you could argue that it started all the way back here. Um, this here is, of course, the Smithsonian Book of Comic Book Comics, one of the handiest, dandiest collections of comics that you could ever own. But let's say, for example, Scribbly had the Mahonkel character and the first incarnation of the Red Tornado, who is basically just this bizarre, in a way, superhero parody. Because, I mean, there's nothing terribly serious about this type of character. She's not particularly doing things that are very heroic. But, not to say that they don't treat her more like a superhero like they did with their other books. And this is a DC character worth mentioning. But as you can see, the cartooning indicates that this is meant to be a funnier type of character. And that's very obvious, especially with that last panel right there. But she's still mainly doing regular superheroics. And a lot of parody superheroes, the big thing with them is that they're pretty incompetent, all things considered. Sometimes they'll save the day, but most of the time they'll just fuck everything up. But I think Mahuncle Red Tornado is kind of a good early example of this. Another great example of this is Plastic Man, who is probably the most famous quote-unquote joke superhero. But I think in the sense of a character like Plastic Man, he's not much of a joke. Yes, he's a funny character, and Plastic Man comics are definitely funnier than most other comics of this era. But regardless of the fact, he's still fairly competent. You could say the same for Captain Marvel. Funny comics, but fairly competent character. I think whenever this really takes a head, though, is with Mad. I think that this strip right here, Super Duper Man, sort of became the touchstone for what parody superheroes would become. In that it takes tropes that are famous and synonymous with superhero characters and really puts them on their head. And not only with the Superman character, but also this Captain Marvel type character as well. And so, I feel like that's a good place as any to start with our first example. And that would be Bob Burden's Flaming Carrot. Flaming Carrot is a character who has quite the history in comics. He started out as this sort of like bizarre fanzine creation, just this nonsensical, very bizarre superhero, and then eventually Aardvark Vanaheim started publishing him, and then after that Dark Horse picked up the rights, that's what this says here, is the Dark Horse stuff, and then eventually Image also got their hands on the character. All done in black and white, all done by Bob Burden, and his either girlfriend and or wife, Roxanne Starr, who does the lettering treatment, which is one of the strangest lettering treatments I've ever seen. But if you've never read a Flaming Carrot comic, pretty much what you need to expect is that nothing will make sense. There's a lot of non sequitur. There is most of the jokes you're probably not going to find terribly funny, or if you're going to find them funny in the sense that they are just fucking bizarre and they make no sense. And then there's of course the case of the Flaming Carrot himself, whose origin story, as it goes, is that he was a regular guy who, after taking a bet to read 400 comic books in one sitting, he suffered brain damage, and thus immediately appeared to everyone else as the Flaming Carrot, and that's what you get. And that's the quote unquote origin of the character. It's simple, it's stupid, it's nonsense, and that's a great way to describe Flaming Carrot comics in general. They are stupid, they are nonsensical, and they're kind of perfect. As you could see, Bob Burden is no slouch as a cartoonist. These are very well composed pages. They use chiaroscuro very well. There's very good black spotting. All the characters have these very appealing yet bizarre designs. Everything just kind of works in Flaming Carrot comics. Even if they aren't going to be the funniest or most interesting thing that you're going to read in your entire life, I still think they're pretty great for what they are. It's also worth mentioning that Flaming Carrot is sort of a precursor to characters like the Tick, in a way. Just being this overly confident, strange, like, sort of character, who also manages to just push himself into any situation possible. And it's very much worth mentioning that the Flaming Carrot has 2 crossovers with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which of course are also kind of superhero parodies in their own ways. Of course, they've evolved beyond that, but they did start as parodies of Frank Miller's Daredevil, and those like very dead serious comic books of that era. And I think that if the Turtles are going to cross over with anyone, why not make it the Flaming Carrot? I think another great example is the Flaming Carrot crossover with Cerebus. I don't have any Cerebus to show here, and while I do think that he definitely sort of fits the mold of the kind of character that we're talking about here, I would say that Cerebus comics are a little bit, I don't want to say smarter, but they definitely look at it in a more philosophical way. But there is a straight up full crossover with the Flaming Carrot and Cerebus, which I find very amusing, especially since it comes right in the middle of one of the most dead serious Cerebus arcs. But all that to say, Flaming Carrot, if you've never read a Flaming Carrot comic, I highly recommend you reading at least one. Make it the Turtles crossover, make it any of the other ones that I've seen, make it just a random one that you find in the 50-cent bin. Great thing about this collection is this really fun, goofy, text-only story, which is something that Bob Burden kind of became more popular for with the character. At some point, he stopped doing straight comics, and started doing more of these like hybrid comic text story sort of things. But yeah, I'm really hoping that we can get more Flaming Carrot collected at some point, because these comics are just that perfect kind of weird. that I think I wish that I could read all of them at some point. The next character that I want to give a spotlight to is Megaton Man, created by Dandy Don Simpson. Megaton Man and Flaming Carrot kind of appeared around very similar eras. So did the Tick. I don't have any Tick with me right here, but a recent rediscovering of my love of the Tick sort of made this video possible. Um, all that to say that I don't have any Tick, unfortunately. But um, I do think that Megaton Man sort of fits what we're talking about here a little bit better, because Megaton Man is not only a superhero parody, but he's also a complete bastardization of Silver Age comic tropes. And that's very evident from the moment that you open the book and you see this Artie Simek lettering treatment and all of the chaos going on that is very emblematic of a Silver Age Jack Kirby Marvel comic. And that's exactly what he's going for here. And I feel like a great thing about parody superheroes is that it gives cartoonists a way to really flex their chops, because it takes a good cartoonist to be able to make an enjoyable, say, superhero story, but it takes a great cartoonist to make something like this, where you can really mess around with the tropes, you can twist up the figure, you can do all these silly sight gags, and in many ways it just shows how much better you are compared to, you know, your average job guy. And I feel like that's a great way of describing the greatness of someone like Danny Don Simpson, because he continues to be hilarious with his cartooning to this day, and I'm glad to say that this Megaton Man stuff has just recently been recollected by Fantagraphics, and so if you really like what you see here, I highly recommend buying that collection, because it's great. It's really good stuff. Um, Don Simpson's amazing at caricature as well, as you can see with this Jerry Lewis, with this Orson Welles. Like he has a very good understanding of what makes a funny comic book. And but you can also tell that he loves this shit. Like this is there's a reason why he was one of the prominent artists on the 1963 Image series, which is, of course, just a parody of, well, not really a parody, but an homage to 60s Marvel. And that's exactly what this is as well. So it just makes sense. Also worth mentioning is Goodman Beaver. The first story is a crossover with Superman, but they had to censor the U, so it's just Spurman. And he's sort of a Super Duper Man type version of the character, where he's a lot more cocky and quite an asshole. And so makes sense that that's sort of take on the character would come from Harvey Kurtzman and Will Elder, since Super Duper Man came from Mad, and, you know, Harvey Kurtzman and Will Elder came from EC and Mad, so, you know, it all kind of comes back together. I also want to mention, isn't that just a great back cover? The Spirit, Steve Canyon, and Megaton Man all standing together. It's so good. So good. I want to take a detour from the creator-owned stuff, and I want to talk about a creator-owned character that was done at a major label, and that's Ambush Bug. Ambush Bug is one of those characters who is very obviously meant to be a parody, but he's a parody from within DC itself, and so in this case, Keith Giffen was able to take these existing characters and fuck around with them in a very funny manner. And Keith Giffen's one of my favorite cartoonists from the big two, and he is someone who is very very much a cartoonist at DC. He's not a penciler. He is a cartoonist who has a complete control over the kind of comics that he makes. And there's a great series going on right now by Michel Fiffe, which is a whole overview of Keith Giffen's career, and it's called The Fiffe Files, and it's excellent, and you should check it out. But I wanted to take this opportunity to just spotlight just how great Keith Giffen is at comedy. And I feel like he has a place with guys like Don Simpson and Bob Burden, and that he enjoys this sorts of stuff, but he's willing to make fun of it too. And also just the fact that he's such a chameleon, and that he can do all these styles justice, including just twisting up his own to make it a more exciting and fun to read comic. These are two specials that I decided to pull out. There is, of course, a main miniseries, but I feel like these give you like a really good sort of example of what these comics are like. This is great right here, this Mr. A parody. That's awesome. This EC cover treatment here. And this playing with the panels is really excellent here too. And as I said, doing that chameleon thing where he's really good at like replicating these art styles. It's amazing to me that this got published in the 80s alongside every other fucking DC comic, because it really is just, it kind of does stand above those. And if you've never read any Ambush Bug, I highly recommend it. It's really fun and very, very funny. And I want to quickly, before I get to the last character that I want to spotlight, I do want to mention another great example of this would be The Jam by Bernie Merlot. I don't have any Jam comics on me. Same deal with Cerebus and the Tick, but The Jam is a really great example of the sort of like parody superhero. But The Jam, I also feel like, is a very literal take on the quote-unquote street-level superhero, because that's what the character is. He quite literally is just this dude who puts on a costume and tries to fight crime, but also not really. But I feel like a lot of the best of that is just because of just how great Bem is as a cartoonist. But still worth mentioning, I think. And I also want to mention one more time where the Big Two made fun of itself, and that's with this take on Plastic Man, which sort of takes a more of a, for lack of a better term, Spunko approach to Plastic Man, as opposed to the original comics. And these are done by Kyle Baker, who already has a pretty unorthodox art style compared to everyone else at DC. But again, it's just very funny that alongside, you know, your, oh my god, look at all these fucking ads. It's very funny that alongside, like, you know, your modern Wonder Woman comics, this sat right next to it. It's just very, very funny to me. But it's nice that these were allowed to happen, because I think comics could or at least mainstream comics, I think, could bother making fun of itself every once in a while. And I feel like stuff like this, give us more, varied things like this. There hasn't been a Kyle Baker Plastic Man in a very, very long time, for Marvel or DC. So, I mean, you want to try something new. Um, but enough about that. I want to get to the last character who I think really sort of fits this mold. Again, I'm cheating a little bit because the character that this is parodying isn't really a superhero per se, but I do think that with what they do with this character, it sort of fits what we're talking about here, and that's fucking Gru. Gru the Wanderer, who is essentially a parody of Conan the Barbarian, is so much more than that. It's a funny, clever, expertly drawn comic that has lasted for fucking ever, and there's really no question as to why. I mean, just look at it. There's obviously an audience for this sort of thing, as there should be, because I mean, Gru is just fucking great. And Sergio Aragonis is just amazing. And I think the marrying of Mark Evanier's words with Sergio Aragonis's pictures is what makes Gru so fun, and interesting, and just sort of rise beyond the quote unquote parody label. Um, and there's so much Gru. If you've never read any Gru, just pick up whatever issue you can find. I have so many of these. These are actually, this is a recollection of a bunch of the early issues of Gru, but you can find these pretty much anywhere. This is actually, I think this is an Epic Comics. Yeah, this is an Epic Comics, sort of quote unquote trade paperback. But I mean, the character started at Eclipse, and I think he went to Dark Horse, and like there's like over 100 Gru comics. Just pick up one and read it. You're gonna have a good time. But I think that we have reached our climax, and so I want to sort of put out a call to whoever's watching and has enjoyed everything that I've discussed up to this moment. We need more characters like this. We need more characters who act as this bastardization of tropes, this fun, just strange take on superheroes as, or even just barbarians or anything as a concept, because these types of comics, they're fun to read, they're weird, they're bizarre, and they're accomplished in what they try to do. And that's something that I just feel like you can't say very much for a lot of comics today. Outside of the alternative scene, there's not a lot of comics that really scratch this kind of itch anymore. And that's either because people don't want to try, or they see stuff like this and they're like, oh well, I mean, we've gone past the need for something like this. And I don't agree. I feel like we can continue making funny superhero parodies until the end of time, because I mean, strike while the iron's hot. Superheroes are the thing right now. So I mean, there's never been a better time to really fuck around with these tropes and just goof off. Because I mean, if they did it back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, imagine what they could do today. And this is a call out to any cartoonist who's watching this, or even just any of the companies who hold the rights to any of these characters. Publish more goofy shit like this. It's genuinely worth it. And there's we have a strong need for shit like this again. Um, and I think if you haven't read any of these, I highly recommend any of them, whether it be Gru or Flaming Carrot. Just read fun comics, man. You don't have to only read extremely serious autobiographical or your, you know, whatever genre comics. Um, Learn to enjoy comics beyond a superficial sort of standpoint. And I feel like comics like these sort of give you that type of enjoyment that I just don't think most could. But with all that said, I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you go check out any of these cartoonists. What is your favorite weird, bizarre parody superhero? I would love to hear from you, um, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks once again for visiting the House of Graphic Literature. I hope you enjoyed your stay.